So security, he points out people who are secure, people who are comfortable, and people who are cheerful. So if you're secure, then he says that you're dull. If you're comfortable, you're dull, and if you're cheerful, you're dull. So he says that you should be the opposite of these things. It's a very pessimistic thing. Now, why is it that people would be insecure, uncomfortable, and not cheerful? Now, it's tied to his description here, which I know I've been saying it since January. I'm going to change these so that these are bigger and you can read them. But it's very small here. It says he's an existential psychiatrist. So a psychiatrist, what does a psychiatrist do? Therapy for the brain. And how is a psychiatrist different from a psychologist? Anybody know?
They help in psychology study.
No, psychologists actually will be clinical, so they'll actually deal with patients, and so do psychiatrists. They both do. The difference is that a psychiatrist is a medical doctor. So if you go see a psychologist, he'll sit there and talk to you and go, so, tell me about your mother, or whatever. You go see a psychiatrist, he's like, oh, you're sad? Here's a prescription. So they deal mostly with brain chemistry, and they'll write subscriptions. Psychiatrists. Psychologists can't write subscriptions. Prescriptions. And have you subscribed to the Union Tribune? So he's an American psychiatrist, and he's also an existentialist, and that's the thing that's hard. An existentialist, what word do you recognize in that word, existentialist?
Existential crisis.
It's tied to an existential crisis. What's that?
Extinct.
It's extinct? Ooh, that's a big concern that they have. Because if you go extinct, what do you no longer do? Live. Yeah, exist. So it's this concern about existence. And they deal a lot with this concern about existence and death. So his thing is essentially, how is it that a person, that you start to really recognize when you become really self-conscious. So if I were to say to you, how about this? If I were to ask you, what does it mean to be self-conscious? What does it mean to be self-conscious? If someone says, oh my God, I'm so self-conscious right now.
Be aware of your actions, feelings, etc.
That's what it means at its core. But how do we usually use it though? When a person is self-conscious?
Knowing what you are, or kind of person.
Ideally.
Overall.
Yeah, but how do people actually use it though when they say I'm self-conscious right now? They say like, I exist in the universe. How do people usually say it though?
Like insecure.
Yeah, like they're insecure. And so you guys are right, that's what it actually means, is to be conscious of yourself, conscious of the fact that you exist, to be secure about who you are, to know who you are. But we typically use it like, oh my God, I'm self-conscious, everyone's looking at me. And so it's an interesting thing because we kind of connect in our minds that to be aware of yourself means therefore to be insecure. To be aware, because why? What are you? Well, first off, I mean, you're a meat bag that walks around in this planet. You realize that there are plants in nature that will kick your ass. And just about everything in terms of animals can do you terrible harm. We see spiders and we see roaches and we freak out over little tiny things like that because we're aware of our fragility. We're aware that the fact that just because we're flesh and bone, it doesn't take much for us to go completely south. It doesn't take a lot for us to die, to be harmed in significant ways. Even like a little bug that runs across your plate, and you go, ugh, and you wipe the plate off with a paper towel as though that does anything at all. And all you're doing is you now have left germs on your plate that maybe now you're going to get sick and die because some little bug just crossed your plate. You know, little things like that freak us out because we aren't secure. We're aware of how vulnerable we are in the world around us. And the thing that we're ultimately vulnerable to is the end of all of it, to go extinct, to die. We become aware of that. So by virtue of the fact that as soon as you become aware that you're a person, and then you become aware that all people are mortal, you now come to the understanding that you therefore are mortal. And that means that in a 12.5 billion-year-old universe, on a 5.5 billion-year-old planet, you're lucky if you can squeeze 100 years out of it. The span of your life is like that, it goes by. When we say things like life is so short, well, yeah. And then we aren't even thinking of it as broadly as it is. And so now when you come to that awareness, it can be a terrifying thing. So an existentialist is someone who's trying to find meaning and purpose in all of this. So yeah, you're not secure. You're always knocking on death's door. And the thing is, it's not even in your control. You can do everything right. You can stand there at the intersection, light turns green, you can go 1, 2, 3, and then you can go out there. But if somebody else is looking for their phone under the seat next to them, you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. There's nothing that you could have done about that. That's how insecure we are. And you can't be comfortable with that fact. And then it has to make you uncheerful. It has to piss you off. It has to be, as soon as you kind of realize, like I think sometimes, I read a lot, I study a lot, I have a lot of ideas, and I think like, oh my God, that's so weird. Someday I'm going to die, and all of that work and effort of becoming this thing that I am today is going to be gone. It almost seems, I'm being charitable. It seems really unfair. So now, how do you find some level of meaning and purpose in all that? And that's what existentialists do. It says, here's the reality of existence. To live is to suffer. You have to find something that makes the suffering worthwhile now. That's where the existentialist steps in. How do I find something to make all of the suffering worthwhile? How can I come up with something that helps me to transcend all of that so that I can wake up every day? And that's an important thing to remember. What's the worst thing that can happen to you? You die. Guess what? It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And you become self-aware of it. Once you become really aware of that, you really internalize it, it can be a terrifying thing. And people will say, like, I'm not worried about it. No, you haven't thought about it then. Maybe that's the solution to it, to not be self-conscious, to not be self-aware. I mean, that's the story of Adam and Eve, isn't it? Adam is walking through, Adam and Eve, they sin, and then they hear God coming, so they go and hide. Why? Because they're self-conscious for the first time. They're aware of the fact that they don't have any clothing on. So when God asks them, why are you hiding from me? They go, oh, because we're naked. How did you know you were naked? Because there's something very closely connected to being self-aware and having a certain level of shame and vulnerability to that. We hate the fact that we're vulnerable. This is why a lot of times people will walk around and pretend to be more than what they are. This is why we like to lie about our achievements, because we're trying to do something to make ourselves seem important. Why? Because we hate the fact that we're so small and that we're so finite and it passes so quickly. We want it to matter. If you break your leg, at least we think like, well, at least I have a good story attached to it. We're thinking in the leasts all the time. At least this, at least that, because we want to have something that matters, something to show for all of this. And so, yeah, you can be, yeah, you're not secure, yeah, you're not comfortable, yeah, you're not cheerful, and that's fine, because that's the reality of existence. But we've got to find something that makes it all worthwhile. Otherwise, yeah, you're going to be, these are the people who end up just full of resentment, full of contempt, and bitter, and angry, and leading lives that don't amount to much. We talked last week, how then do you make your life worthwhile? How do you make it meaningful? Well, you recognize the importance and the significance of this moment. It's the only thing that's real. Your future plans aren't real. They exist only in your imagination. The things you've done in the past, they're real in the world, but they're still just a memory. There's nothing that can be affected. But to understand the power and the importance of this moment right now, that you can make it great, or you can make it not. The choice is yours, I suppose. But you can make that decision on a daily basis. It doesn't mean that this is where I want to be right now. I imagine most of us would much rather be standing at the pyramids in Egypt checking them out. Or many of us, if you could be anywhere in the world and you ask that question, where would you be? Very few people would say, right here, right now. But then that means that your mind is always thinking about something else and being somewhere else, which means that this moment is never good enough. It's like when we plan our future selves, what we're saying when we do that is that my present self is not good enough. And I guess the word enough there is the important part. Enough for what? It's good enough for this moment, so therefore what you are right now is good enough. But you're not, but maybe if you're the exact same person right now as in 10 years, maybe you're not good enough for that moment in 10 years. So this is why we also use every moment to get better, to prepare for the next one. Because the next one is coming. 5.5 billion years on this planet, tomorrow has always come. And there's a good chance it's going to come tomorrow too, and tomorrow too, and tomorrow too. But it's not real yet. It will be real when it happens. So we have to find a way to make it worthwhile, and to make it. Because Well, it's the only thing that's real. It's the only thing that's real, this moment right now. So it doesn't mean that therefore you should say, you know what, I'd rather be in Egypt, and you get up and you walk out, because you can't always do that. But what you can do is decide, I have to be here right now, so I'm going to go ahead and make this the best possible moment that it can be. And then for the next moment, and then the next moment, and then the next moment. And then a weird thing happens. It's like every day if you do 100 push-ups. 100 push-ups isn't a lot. It might sound like a lot. But if you do 100 push-ups today, and then tomorrow, and the day after that, weird things happen after a couple of months. All of a sudden you go, wow, I'm stronger. And I feel stronger. I look, I can see the muscles on me growing. And it wasn't a lot. It was 100 push-ups. It would take you, what, a few minutes every day. But then a weird thing happens, like I said, after a while, all of a sudden you're strong. If you maximize this moment for what it is, not for what you hope, not for what you wished it was, but for what it actually is. And then the next moment, and then the next moment. And you fast forward a few years, a weird thing is happening. You've now led a meaningful life, a purposeful life. You've done way more. That's of value than you otherwise ever would have. If instead, if you convinced yourself that every minute didn't matter, oh, it's just this, it's just a Monday, it's just the afternoon, it's just this moment, it's just this, then your life is full of justs. That's all it'll ever be, only, merely, which means that there's no meaning to it. You might as well have never even been here. But the fact is you are here. You know? That's why when people want to commit suicide and move on, it's like, don't. You've got all of eternity to be there. Don't be in a rush for that. You'll get there. But maybe make the most of it. By the way, like I said, the worst that could possibly happen to you, actually, Angel said, the worst that can happen to you is that you're going to die. And once you accept this fact, I guess now the real question is, maybe the only meaningful question at this point is, what are you afraid of? You know? Oh, I can't take this one risk. Why not? Because what if I get embarrassed? You're going to die. You're worried about being embarrassed? You're going to die. When you die, you're going to shit your pants. Most people do. You realize that. So what do? Well, then I'm just never going to die. Yeah, it's going to happen. And you're going to embarrass yourself. Oh, but at least I won't be there for it. Yeah, but you won't be there for the moment that you're embarrassed for either. It's in the past. It's not the present moment. It's amplified by your memory, sure, but it's not what you are right now. Well, take this chance. Oh, but if I take this chance, what if I go bankrupt? Ooh, you're going to be poor. Oh, you're going to die. And if you really understand that, then taking these risks and taking these chances, is much easier. But I'm not saying, therefore, go for anything, because who cares if you live or die? Because, again, you're looking for a high level of meaning and purpose. The point is just that if you can face the fear of death every day, which all of you do, if you wake up every morning, you get up and you come over here, then you're facing a lot of fears, even if you're facing them ignorantly. Maybe you don't realize the inherent danger of walking down the street or something like that. But if you're able to face that fear every day, then maybe face the other fears. Because that's just the fear that gets you out of bed, that keeps you living. Now facing the other fears that make the living worthwhile. Face that fear of whatever it is that you want to try. Face that fear of death. Don't face it recklessly, because tomorrow is going to come. Tomorrow is going to come. Don't be in such a rush for it, though. Enjoy the moment for what it is, and make the most of the moment for what you could make it. And then, ultimately transcend the suffering and have a meaningful life. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy-ish Tuesday.